this StreamYard. It's an easy way to do live here on YouTube, because I don't have 10,000 followers on YouTube yet, because you have to have that to be able to do live. I can do live on Instagram. I used to, but Instagram is not a good application, because it has some problems sometimes, and I'm going to turn it on live here on Instagram, just to call people, because I have 15,000 followers on Instagram. Maybe some of them show up here, decided to listen to us. So let's start.
Cool.
Raphael, please, first of all, present yourself here for us.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Raphael Sirtoli. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Minho in Braga, where I'm studying neuropsychiatry, basically, and also the ketogenic diet in a rat model of schizophrenia. So I'm looking at metabolic side effects and all of these things. So that's what I'm doing in my PhD. But one of the reasons that I'm here today is to talk about diet and the Paleolithic and the diets that humans evolved to eat. And that's the subject of the paper I published with some colleagues recently, and that appeared in the Portuguese media. So I'm here to answer any questions about it and give you my view of what humans evolved to eat.
Yes, just a little minute, because I'm trying to fix my comment here to tell people that we are here on YouTube. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to fix the comment. Oh, I can't fix the comment. Ok, let me tell people here. Pessoal, a gente está no YouTube, tá? O link tá nos stories. Vamos embora lá pro YouTube. Come on over. It's better here. So, I have this surprise when I saw this article on O Público for people that are in Brazil. O Público is one of the main newspapers here in Portugal. There is O Público and Expresso, the two most important newspapers here in Portugal. And we have this terrible mindset here in Portugal. People here are not the ancient, the ancestral tradition here is different, because people here love to eat meat. In Portugal, people eat a lot of meat, but the government and WHO wants to tell people not to avoid meat because it's dangerous, to avoid fat, saturated fat, all this polemic. And when I saw your article on O Público, I was already with your article, The Evolution of the Human Trophic Level During the Pleistocene, to read. But I was reading first the other article from Mickey Bendor, The Man, the Fat Hunter, which is very important to understand this your article with him, because it shows the importance of the big prey to human nutrition, to this history. And then when I saw this article on Público, I have to read it, because it has 30 pages. Which of them, half of the pages are from references, which is very good, because you studied a lot. So tell us a little about your article, about all these findings of all of these results that that form this hypothesis. Tell us, please.
Yeah, so this is a big paper, like you said. It's a long read. It's very dense with a lot of different references, because the way we constructed our argument, which is basically that humans evolved as hypercarnivores, which means that we ate more than 70% of our calories from animals, because we were apex predators, we were great hunters. So that's what we argued. And the way we did this is, of course, we had to look at many different kinds of evidence from very different fields. So it wasn't just anthropology, where we're looking at, the remains in caves and the study of the bones, or what is in the teeth. We're looking at more than just that. We're also looking at, for example, things that have to do with anatomy or genetics, for example, behavior. So it's very, very wide sort of argument, and we needed that because the people who ate the way they ate in our past, they're dead, and the closest people who resemble our ancestors are the very few remaining hunter-gatherer tribes that still exist today. And first of all, they're very few and far between, and they're also not the same. You have my cat who's joining us. Another carnivore in the family.
Yes, yes.
And the question is really that if you look at modern tribes today, they live in a very different environment than they could have maybe during the Pleistocene, where there was much more fatty, large animals available for us to eat. Nowadays, we hunted them basically to extinction in many cases.
Yes,
so we're left
yes.
with smaller animals, with the different animals. We have to adapt by maybe learning to breed plant foods and detoxify plant foods with processing. So we have to adapt. And this is the story that we told in this paper, where you can imagine we really came down from the trees, became bipedal, started to scavenge food, right? Break open the skull, break open the bone, and you can access the brains and the marrow, which before you couldn't access. So you have more calories, you have more fat calories. So your diet is starting to tend towards more low carb, ketogenic. You get higher nutrient dense food, so higher quality food, and your intestine shrinks to accommodate this. Then you get smarter. You can start to hunt more, so you can get the bigger animals, and you have this very successful progress up the trophic chain. And eventually you're so successful that you've hunted out a lot of the large animals, and you have to adapt now. And during the end of the Pleistocene, we start seeing more evidence that would say that humans have consumed plants. We can't say how much, really, because the evidence isn't good, but we can say maybe they were eating a bit more plants when they were going towards agriculture. But for most of the human history, it was really predominantly meat, it seems. Meat, fish, shellfish, even eggs, that sort of thing. So this is the argument that we made, and it's very controversial because, as you know, the official guidelines do not propose guidelines that resemble the argument that we're making in any way. They're saying the exact opposite, actually. They're saying don't minimize animal foods, and you can even sometimes eliminate them completely. And that plants really are the base of diets and of nutrition. And so it's the totally opposite picture that we're arguing.
Yes, and we have here in your study some evidences that are amazing. The one about stomach acidity. I would like you to explain how much it costs to our body to rebuild the walls of the stomach because of this acidity, isn't it? And it's very acidic.
Right. So we have a very low pH, which means very acidic stomach. And this is something that has quite a cost to our body, because the lining of our stomach has to be renewed constantly. It's really an ongoing process, and it's something that doesn't happen on the order of years, but happens on the order of days. So it's something that doesn't happen by chance. It happens because there is a selection pressure for this. And the way that yes, please.
No, it's more acid than other carnivores, indeed.
Right. Yes. So it's even more acidic than carnivores that we presently know to definitely be carnivores. And the interesting thing is that it might have to do with the first part that I mentioned a few minutes ago, which was the scavenging that we evolved to do. Because when you scavenge meat, it ferments, and there's bacteria, and there's viruses, and there's dirt, and there's a lot of things there which your immune system has to learn to handle. And one of the best ways it can do that is with a very acidic stomach, a low pH. And so it seems that you would expect this if we were scavengers and also hunters. Then it would make more sense that we had the stomach acid. But if you maintain the view that we're sort of this very generalist omnivore and not this specialist hypercarnivore, then you have more difficulty explaining that.
Yes, and it's interesting because this large prey that we used to chase in the past, we have to maintain it. It lasts for weeks, and probably they ate rotten meat. And only with
Right.
this acid on the stomach, it was possible to eat this meat without getting sick, because of this acidity. It's very interesting. Another thing we should talk under evidence, it's about the brain expanse. We have a very smart brain, a big brain, and that demand a lot of energy. And this energy didn't come from cooked vegetables, as some people think, but from fat. And we are so fat adapted. Talk about a little bit about it, please, Raphael.
Yeah, the story of fire and how it helped us become human. It's really interesting because what fire allows you to do is to pre-digest food. Basically, when you cook food, the idea is that you help do some of the work that your digestive system would be doing, and you can get more out of your food, so more nutrients, even more calories. And if fiber can sometimes stop the absorption of foods, then you can also cook that away essentially. So it has a way of increasing the nutrient and caloric density of the diet. Now, some people have taken that to say, well, we basically dug up more tubers and we learned to cook them, and that provided the extra calories. And that's how we evolved. And we also know this because brains use mostly glucose anyways. So it makes total sense that you would have to eat glucose. And that was one of the lines of argumentation. We took a different perspective. We think that tubers weren't providing a big reward on investment. That means that the foraging strategy wasn't a lucrative one. It wasn't beneficial. It was more beneficial to hunt and to go get larger animals, which we could cook over the fire and also benefit from cooking and fire in that way. So we lower the pathogen load by cooking, right? We could use the stomach acid to neutralize, or we could use fire to lower the pathogen load. There are many advantages. It gave us more calories. It gave us more nutrients on average. So this made more sense to see fire and cooking in helping drive the brain expansion more than tubers and starch, because the fire timeline is not really in sync with the starch view. And there's not much evidence that starch has a lot of physiological reasons why it would be crucial for brain expansion compared to animal food like fat and things that help you produce ketones, which are used for the brain growth of the infant, or DHA, which is really an animal form of omega-3, which is crucial for brain development. So if you look really at many different lines of evidence, you understand that, yes, we may have cooked tubers, and it was probably useful if we failed to catch an animal to have this as a fallback food, and fire was great.
Food, yes.
Yeah, because we could get more calories out of the tuber, and that's great. But why wouldn't you exploit the animals in the cooking and make this the predominant source of calories? And probably it explains brain growth better.
Yes, but between cooking and fat availability for this surplus, this energetic surplus, which one do you think is more relevant to our thrive on all this period?
Right. Yeah, so the question of what we evolved to eat is one question. And then the question of what should we be eating today for our health personally, they're very linked, but they're not exactly the same. But for sure, I think if you're trying to figure out for yourself what you should do, you should know how your ancestors ate. So that's my view.
Yes,
it helps to keep it in the science, because if we don't know what we ate, then it's a lot of guessing and anecdote, and it's difficult. And with evolution, we can get a basis to think about it more. And I think that when a brain runs on fat primarily, so I mean that your brain is taking fuel from the tank that is your fat tissue. And humans have a lot of fat tissue on their bodies,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Compared to other animals. So we use a lot of dietary fat, but we also use a lot of stored fat, right? We cycle between both of them. And it allows us to supply the brain with a lot of stable energy, because it not only provides the fat that gets turned into ketones that can then go into your brain and be used for fuel, but it also supplies a big portion of the glucose that your own body can make to regulate the glucose that it needs. Because you don't have to eat glucose to regulate glucose. You can just
you produce it.
Carbohydrate, fat, and protein, and have your body create the glucose according to the need that it requires. So there is a certain, exactly. So you have gluconeogenesis, which really helps maintain the system in a way where we don't rely on dietary glucose, which means that we have to rely on something else, and that is fat and protein. So in that sense, I think it's a strong argument for why someone might choose a lower carb diet in that regard, because it's probably a bit easier to get a lot of the health aspects right than to do it with a higher carb diet. Maybe it's possible. Some would say it's certainly possible, and we have examples of healthy populations eating a lot of starch. But it doesn't mean that it will work for most people, or that it's the best fit with our physiology. So there's what's possible, and then there's what's optimal. And I think what's closer to optimal is a lower carb style of diet, and mainly with a lot of animal food. I would say that's primary even than the macronutrients in a sense.
Animal based. In fact, this fasting length we have, it's an evolutionary advantage, because we can stay many days without eating because of this fat tissue we have. And this it's indeed another evidence, adipocyte morphology, because we have more this subcutaneous fat, and that's a deposit of an energy depot we have to spend during the no feeding times. Another thing, it's very interesting, and I saw you talk to Brad Marshall. I also talked to him. I made a live with him about his Ross theory, which is fantastic. And this insulin resistance, let me read here the evidence on this study. Humans, like carnivores, have a low physiological, non-pathological insulin sensitivity. And it's interesting because his theory, the theory of Peter Dombrowski, which I'm so fan of, is about it. Because when you eat saturated fat, this signals satiety, because it produces a lot of ROS and tells hypothalamus, about the satiation, and so you get satiated, and that's okay. And that doesn't happen with the seed oil that we are told to shift since 1960s. And this interesting because insulin resistance, non-pathological, important to highlight this. It's completely physiological, and it's normal, and it's desirable, because that's what guarantee our satiety. And it's sometimes, it's all the time, health practitioners that are not used to this content make a lot of mess with this, and take one fantastic result of a blood test of someone that is ketogenic, keto adapted, as, you're getting diabetic because you're getting insulin resistant. This diet is awful. Move away from this diet. And this is completely normal. Tell us a little bit about it, Raf. Raf is you call yourself, isn't it, Raf?
Yeah.
Rafi.
Yeah, Rafi or Raphael, either is fine. So you brought up many interesting things, because there is the view that I would say the simplistic view that diabetes and blood glucose and obesity and all of these things, metabolic health, it's really mostly to do with the carbohydrate amount. That's maybe a very simplistic view. There's some truth to it, of course. The amount of carbs you eat matters a lot, but so does the quality, for example.
Yes.
We know that different carb sources can affect hormones differently. But
Yes.
it's not just about the carbohydrate macronutrient, it's also about fat. And historically, we've been told that saturated fat is the bad one, and fat is bad because it contains a lot of calories, essentially. So I think both of these things are completely false. Fat is neither good nor bad. It's food that we're evolved to eat, and depending on the kind of fat you have, you're going to have very different effects. So saturated fat that you eat, let's say from dark chocolate or a steak, for example, it's going to have a certain profile. And when you eat the sort of diet that you and I are talking about, one with a lot of animal foods and low in carbs, you will tend to get a lot of saturated fat, a lot of monounsaturated fat, and a small amount of polyunsaturated fat. And the polyunsaturated fat is the interesting bit, because really it's where it's not so much a source of energy so much as it is a signaling molecule. And this molecule has very important message. Omega-3 and omega-6 together, what they're doing is they're regulating the immune system, they're regulating inflammation, they're signaling different organs to grow at different rates. They're doing a whole bunch of really important things. So you want them to be in balance. And one of the imbalances that we're learning about is that you have way too much omega-6, which is called linoleic acid.
Yes.
And some people say we don't have enough omega-3 as well. There's some truth to that, but it's the big problem, the elephant in the room, is the excess of omega-6.
Of omega-6, yes.
Exactly, and specifically linoleic acid. So that is the one that's most interesting to you and me, because we think it can explain a couple of things. It should be able to explain a lot of the problems with obesity, and it should be able to explain a lot of the problems we see with diabetes. So if you can, with one thing, explain a lot of the things that you see with diabetes and obesity, you're starting to make a lot of good progress. And so the people that you've interviewed before, like Brad and the ideas from Peter, what they're essentially saying is that when you have too much linoleic acid, omega-6, you're going to break your fat cell such that it's going to get fatter than it otherwise would. And the downstream effect of that is that you also don't get the right signal that's telling you to stop eating.
Yes.
It's breaking of the mechanism in the fat cell that's telling you that you have a problem with eating. So the problems when people can't control their hunger and they're fat, when they're obese, we tend to think something broke their hunger and then they got fat. And we're not saying this. We're saying they got fat, and so their hunger is changing to adapt to the fact that they're fat, because they're losing calories into fat cells. The fat cells are like aspirating it away from what the body needs. Exactly.
It's like a sponge. It absorbs everything.
Exactly.
Fat you eat, it absorbs.
Yeah. Exactly. And your body is going to adapt to that. So it's going to change your behavior. It's going to change the amount that you move. It's going to change your mood. It's going to, it's a very fundamental shift that's going on. So we know that we've been eating much more linoleic acid, much more omega-6, because we know that in soybean oil, in sunflower oil, all of that stuff, that's what you buy in the supermarket that's cheap. That's what the industry has invested in producing. So we know people are eating more of it. We know that humans accumulate it in their fat. So we can measure that it's accumulated in their fat. We can test it in animals and humans to show that fat cells get broken in a specific way that fits with what we're saying. And we can see that you can make animals very fat with linoleic acid easily. You can make animals get cancer easily with more linoleic acid. In fact, it's hard to make a rat cancerous without enough linoleic acid. So we know
Yes.
it's disrupting something important. And the question is,
Yes.
okay, what exactly is it doing? And how is it making things worse when you add lots of sugar, let's say, on top of it? Then you've got the
Yes.
perfect
The
bomb, you know?
storm, the perfect storm.
Right.
Yes. I was watching your video with Brad Marshall. It's interesting his experience, what he tells about the pig, the porks, the way
Right.
porks are bred over here in Europe, over there in United States. In the United States, they made this engineering with the genetic engineering, and the pork there to make the pork don't get fat. And so the porks over there are not efficient in getting fat with food. They don't do lipogênese de novo. Lipogênese de novo. They don't do this. So they rely completely on their diet to make their fat. So their fat is totally from omega-6, and because it's corn. And over here in Europe, they use barley, and barley it's very good to lipogênese de novo. And in fact, indeed, the bacon we buy here in Portugal is very firm. It's different from the American bacon, even from Brazilian bacon. I guess Brazilian bacon they fed the pork are fed with corn too, because it's very soft. It's it melts in your hands. And here it's completely different. You see, the fat is saturated fat. It's better. It's better. Another thing, another point here, very very interesting. Just to close the subject, this shows that even in the animals, it's easy to see the difference of the diet, that it affects us. It's very nice. It's a very nice subject. I saw you made a talk with Tucker Goodrich too. Tucker Goodrich, it's fantastic with this subject. I tell people every time to watch their content too. Another evidence here that is very interesting, and I think it's a break of paradigm, is longevity, because it here says that the hunting proficiency peaks by age 40. It's interesting because the health, the condition of the population afterwards, Neolithic, got worse because of vegetables, because of grains. That's agriculture, when agriculture arrived in the earth, the planet. But before that, man used to live a lot. He didn't die early as some people think, because of this average is low, because of that there were lots of infection. People died of infections, but the one that survived from animal chasing and from infections lived a lot. Tell us a little bit about this health condition of the Paleolithic man, please.
Yeah, I love that you bring up that point, because it's one of the things that I'm very disappointed when anthropologists or scientists say these things in popular science or in interviews, when they say, "Oh, we used to die in our 30s when we were cavemen." That's totally wrong. That's totally wrong. And the reason is kind of simple, really. It's that all of the big difference in death within infancy or childbirth even. So if you could survive childbirth and your very early infancy in the first couple of years, then you had a pretty good chance of making it at a ripe old age that could be, pretty much what we see today. 70s, 80s, even pushing 90. So we do see that, and the reason is that all the deaths, of course, have changed from childbirth and infancy. So we do have this ability to, we live quite a long time compared to most other species, and it's curious why. And you mentioned a popular reason. There's the grandmother hypothesis. That's pretty popular, that there's a benefit to having grandmother around so she can take care of the kids, and free up the time for the parents to provide their more calories and more diverse foods. Or you can also think of it as the skill you need to hunt is going to accumulate over many, many years. And That's one thing
Yes.
that's going to push age upwards as well. And I think it's an interesting one, because you realize, if you ever tried to hunt, and I haven't actually ever gone hunting, but listening to people who have, they will tell you how incredibly difficult it is, and how it's a skill that takes a lifetime. It's not a 2-week course you can take, right? And so this requires a lot of intelligence, and it
Yes.
requires knowledge transmission across generations as well, as your environment changes. So it's a really complex task that probably did pressure evolution to keep us living longer. And again, hunting and what we
Yes.
do with hunting, which is eat meat, is really at the center of probably longevity as well in that regard.
Yes, yes, and this whole social organization that was on this that time, it's very interesting, because it allowed a small group to work together, and this small the job, the work, the prey that small group would catch would feed all the group, all the big group they were part of, and children and women. And so I can see this as a high profit job, which allow other people to not work on raising children and taking care of the community, but a few hours of work, some hours of work, allow people to spend many days without working. And if you think like an orangutan, and this is monkeys that spend all day chewing plants, it's you can compare and see how much this sort of lifestyle is profitable, and allow society to live better and have more time to do other things, and to develop themselves, to learn, to rest, to sleep, and everything else, because it's a profit. Because I saw in your video you did with Vicky, the co-author Mickey Bendor, that 14,000 calories from plants, and against 50,000 calories from animal protein. I think per day, I don't remember what is the metric that he used, but it's completely different, the amount of productivity you gain from animal products compared with plant nutrition. So it's very interesting how much this kind of organized the social structures at the time. It freezed.
Yeah, it's really important, because we're can you hear me?
The kind, not so much. You have a problem with your internet.
Can you hear me
now yes, you return. He went back again.
Okay, I'm back. The social. How about now?
Okay. Yes, I think now it's working. Let's try. Yes.
Okay,
let's go.
Yeah, the social organization is really important. There's a lot of food that you can get from one elephant or one mammoth or one large game. And it requires a lot of cooperation. It requires developing technology. It requires some tools that we developed over millennia. It's really organizing. It's also leading to trade as well, because you trade with other groups and you have more time where you don't need to be hunting. And when you have more time and you're able to trade, you develop these networks. And we really pushed this to the extreme, where we got so good at hunting that we started to imagine, what if we settled? What if we started to accumulate food with grain, which we couldn't really do with meat to the same extent? So it even was so successful that it led us into agriculture, where of course we had a lot of health problems, but we also could spend even more time well, we could save food and spend time working, be quote productive. So it's interesting because nowadays, of course, we're so far into industrialization and agricultural systems that we're now looking back to the past and thinking, and if you can just hunt to gather your food, you have so free time. But if you have to work to get your food, then you're at a job all day, and it's really difficult to get free time. So there's some paradox there. There's probably a healthy ground there where we can imitate our hunter-gatherers ancestors in terms of freeing up our time, which is what they could do with hunting animals and not chewing leaves all day in trees, like you mentioned.
Yes.
Right, it's just a cow, that's all it does. It just ruminates and eats and ferments food, and we have a very different digestive system, so we can rely on a lot of hunted meat for that, and it should free us today, but we have other constraints.
Yes, it's interesting because today people start doing intermittent fasting and start to try this. Are you listening to me? Mm-hmm. Your image is kind of frozen. Yes, no, it's back. I think you're having problems with your internet. Okay, people start trying intermittent fasting and get amazed about how many times they are free to do other things instead of being eating all day long. Right. It's very liberating, very free feeling. Henrique is a student of nutrition in Brazil. Amazing, his profile is amazing. He's asking us to talk about optimal foraging hypothesis. What is that? I don't know. Optimal foraging.
Yeah. So the optimal foraging strategy is the term that we use to talk about the different options that animals can choose from when deciding how they're going to get food, right? So the humans could spend time foraging for berries and tubers, for example, or they could spend time building tools to go hunting. And when we look at those strategies, we try to find the optimal one. So the optimal foraging strategy that we think makes more sense for humans is hunting large fatty animals. And we can compare this on a calories per hour basis. You can compare it in nutrients per hour. There are different ways to compare it, but it's usually calories. And it's a really important tool because it's using some parameters and some math to really see what is most likely to be selected by the species.
Yes. So we always we used to chase what were more would gave us more calories and was more profitable in terms of calories to achieve this calorie surplus. And we have Fernando, wait a little bit. I will ask your question. Fernando Tadeu, c'est mon mari, my husband. Yes, about this paradox of vitamins, because people today believe in the colorful plate, a colorful dish with nutrition diversity. This paradox about nutritional diversity is very interesting because it goes straight to our guidelines that says we have to eat a little bit of everything. What do you think about it in this perspective of this study?
Yeah, so this is where I want to look at the doctors and I want to look at the scientists and say, like, are you kidding me? Because really, if they think of it in evolutionary terms, they really would have to come up with a different answer. And medicine has to have evolution at the heart of it. Otherwise, it's theater. So. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to be honest.
Yes, well, please be honest.
You know why? Because this wrong idea leads parents who really want to do the best thing for their kids to give them bad diets. And it's so sad because they try so hard, and by trying harder, they make it worse. Because they're following the wrong information. And it's so that's why I'm not happy with the professionals.
Yes.
But basically, animals are more nutrient dense, and the reason is that they can concentrate a lot of the nutrition that we require into their body, and then we digest them with our very specialized digestive system that's made exactly for these foods. So
Yes.
the acidity of our stomach, like we were saying, the length of the different parts of our stomach, all these things are fine-tuned to extract nutrients from animals, whether raw or cooked. We're very good at doing both. Maybe it's easier when it's cooked, but we can eat raw animal diets, and be fine.
Yes.
So the question is really, like, can a carnivore diet be healthy, really, right? Because if it can be
Yes.
healthy, then it changes everything, because then we cannot have the same guidelines that we have today. So I think a carnivore diet is healthy in terms of nutrient availability. That's clear. Now,
Yes.
is it optimal? That's more debatable. Maybe optimal is 90% carnivore diet and 10% vegetables. Maybe it's 100% carnivore diet. Maybe it's 70%. I don't know. The truth is, no one can tell you exactly. But generally speaking, the most nutrient-dense food, meat-based, fish,
Yes.
crustaceans, eggs, all of these things, they are in the right version, many of the nutrients, so they're in the active form, not the inactive form, which is has to be converted, and you lose a lot of the nutrient in the process. It doesn't come with as many anti-nutrients, because plants use anti-nutrients to maintain the elements that they need for their growth and reproduction and all of that. So it tends to interfere with our absorption. Fiber interferes with absorption.
Yes.
So there are many reasons. Yeah. Exactly. So there are many reasons which makes beef superior to kale, but vastly superior. It's not even comparable. It's not even comparable. Right.
Yes.
Like you can live off beef, you can't live off kale. So that's all you need to know,
Yes.
So it's
This
important people understand that. Yeah.
Understand that. This big mistake, this big myth, fiber myth. I fell on this trap too in the past. I was I think every one of us has fallen on this trap. I have Fernando Tadeu. I'm going to make to do this, to put this question in afterwards in the final. Okay. Henrique Altran. Henrique Altran is saying that this extinction, this big prey extinction, put some vegetables in our diet as fallback foods. We've talked about it, Henrique, the end of the beginning of the live. Indeed, it occurred. I think I could understand from this study that plants come arriving more frequent as we approached to Neolithic era, to agricultural revolution era. It comes increasing, and the peak was the grains, when the grains came, and the population changed completely the way they organized because of the crops.
Right. Yeah. We do see a dip probably in the consumption of animals right before the Neolithic. Right at the end of the Pleistocene, of the Upper Pleistocene, we see a little less evidence of humans being hypercarnivores. Probably just carnivores, not the hyper part. Probably adapting to the lack of large animals. Yes. Probably also better developing processing technology to have access to more plants that aren't toxic. It could be maybe there's a change in the climate as well. There could be a series of things that explain this decrease. But it's not. So there is this decrease that we note, but it doesn't seem so consequent to our physiology nowadays. There is some evidence of some changes in the selection for certain genes, for example, to desaturate some certain fats. So we have some evidence there. We have some evidence from teeth, more teeth remains to suggest that there was maybe more starch. But it's not very strong evidence, but there is evidence that we started to include a bit less animals, but still we had a predominance of animals even then in our diet. So it's interesting to think what it means for nowadays, but I don't think when you look at the whole picture of the whole of our evolution, we're still a hypercarnivore physiology essentially.
Yes, for sure. Let me say another question here from Mauro. How can we have a good digestion of meat if our diet is so bad, eating food that destroy our stomach with soda, a lot of coffee, and so bad food? It's easy
That's a good question.
to answer. Yeah, good question, but it's easy.
Yeah.
Just to have to remove the elephant on the room.
Right. It's it's a question that I ask myself because I have an inflammatory bowel disorder called ulcerative colitis, and there is Crohn's disease, and the other one this is ulcerative colitis, and those two sort of make up this inflammatory bowel disorder. And I've been thinking of this for quite some time now, and there are some things that definitely help for sure. Everyone will get some relief, some improvement, but it's not diseases we treat very well either with drugs, surgery for the really extreme cases, but for most people it's going to be diet that's going to make the biggest difference.
Yes.
And really the simplest way that you can understand the state of your digestion is to either fast and just see how the difference that it makes, because then you control for every food, you just remove everything. So fasting is often very helpful for people with digestive disorders, whether it's just bloating or whether it's a serious Crohn's disease flare-up. Fasting is good for both. In both cases, it can help. But also basically a carnivore diet, which means eliminating plants which carry the highest natural pesticide load to humans. It's plants.
Lectins.
Right? So there's the lectins that can have disruptive effects and that can bind minerals. It's like the phytic acids. There's different things that can interfere with digestion. So the easiest thing is to do a fasting or an elimination diet, and to then add things back in and to see how things change. This is the most advanced science in 2021. If people talk about special drugs, blah, 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 this is less scientific. The best, most rigorous science, the carnivore code. Exactly. It's going to be an elimination diet.
Just to read it. Yes, fantastic.
Yep. Exactly. Yes. So I think it's very useful now. If you have a serious digestive issue, the diet change might not be enough. So then you also have to think about anti-inflammatories and things like this that you can lead into. But the base of it has to be diet, really, I think, realistically.
Yes, totally agree. Henrique asks, what can you say about the increase of the number of copies amylase gene? It's interesting. I didn't understand a little bit. It's good to see if you could explain us.
Sure. The AMY1 copy question has to do with the amylase gene and how many copies of it that there are, and what this means for humans. And why do humans have amylase? They break down starch. That's what amylase, the amylase enzyme does. So the number of copies that we have of amylase, the idea is the more copies we have, the more we need to break down starch. We see an increase in the copy of starch breaking enzymes. This suggests that we ate more tubers, our brain grew bigger with tubers. It suggests all things to a lot of people. It suggests we can handle starch better. It suggests all of these things. But when you start looking actually at the experimental evidence of this, it's a different thing, because we see that actually diabetics, right, who have, and we look at their AMY1 copy number, well, the higher the number, they don't do better, right? It doesn't actually help them, apparently. So it's the hypothesis that more AMY1 means better handling of starch metabolically. That's not true. Other people say, well, it's suggesting that we encountered more starch in the environment. maybe it doesn't help, but just that we had more starch in the environment. Well, it doesn't really fit with what we see from the hunting, right? Or the decrease in the prey, or it doesn't fit with what we see in the stable isotope evidence, which is the bone. And we can see where the stuff from the bone comes from. It comes from grains or it comes from animals. So the AME1 theory really is not really indicative that we're starch eating people. We don't know what it means, actually. We know that it was selected, but we don't really know why. And I think I don't think it has to do with diet, actually. I don't know what it has to do with, but I don't think it has to do with diets. I think it will appear in some, in genetics, there's this thing we call pleiotropic effect. And what it means is that when you make this one change to the gene, it can have many different effects. So that's why it's really hard to say, okay, this genetic change means exactly this, change in our behavior, our physiology. And I think in this case, I don't think it means that we were eating more and more starch.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you something that's not here in this study about vitamin C. Yes, indeed, there is a point here about vitamin C, but not about uric acid, as long as I remember. Do you think we evolved to shift to uric acid as an antioxidant instead of the ability to produce vitamin C? Because they both make this role of antioxidant on our bodies. And do you think we use it and that's enough? We have a no or very low carb diet, because it competes, carbohydrate competes, glycose competes with vitamin C in the transporters. Do you think we shift to uric acid as antioxidant as species?
Well, yeah, so this idea that you're talking about is really interesting, and it's actually my friend Amber O'Hearn who really first proposed this, as far as I know, and she was looking at what could explain the fact that people who eat, let's say, just to keep it simple, steak-only diet, right? You really have to ask the question, why don't they have scurvy? Because if you measure the amount of vitamin C in meat, depending on how fresh it is and how much blood there is and all of these things, it can be very low. It's certainly low to very just low. Non-existent, basically.
Yes, almost not.
Yeah, so it's surprising. You would think that people would have problems after weeks or a couple of months, but we don't tend to see this. In fact, I'm still looking for case reports of a person who had a vitamin C deficiency. I can never verify it. It's always an anecdote. There's never like a case report in a medical journal. And given the number of people who do this nowadays, it would appear. So I'm like, wow, this is interesting. We're learning that vitamin C needs, it's still essential, but it's much lower depending on the metabolic context. And so the question
is,
and the diet. Yes, so exactly, the diet, the metabolic context. What is helping us maintain vitamin C sufficiency? Some people think, like my friend Amber, that if you eat a high meat diet, you're going to get a lot of carnitine, which is going to help the fat burning part that vitamin C is involved in as an antioxidant, right? And that all of the glycine and the other amino acids in meat are going to replace a lot of the work that is required. That vitamin C is required to do.
Glutathione, is that in English? Glutathione.
Yeah, glutathione is the idea is that it's increasing to reduce the need for vitamin C antioxidant status. So you have what it does for collagen, what it does for antioxidant status, and what it does for fat transport. That these things could explain why maybe vitamin C can be spared in a carnivorous context.
Yes, I guess so. I agree, totally agree. So one more question here. One more question here from Henrique. That's very interesting. I didn't know that the diabetic who have more copies doesn't do better on glucose metabolism. Great. Interesting.
Yeah, it surprised me too when I read it. I didn't know.
Yes, it's interesting. I have one question here. It's from Mon-Marie, my husband here, Fernando Tadeu. My question is how to overcome, because he's journalist, you see, he's journalist and a professor of physics education. He has two degrees, My question is how to overcome the prejudices in the media campaigns, which besides spreading the interests of the industry on a large scale, helps to spread the prejudice against eating meat.
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I don't know how good of an answer I can give, but I think one of the things I can say is that in order to make a difference, people have to become aware of it, and the incentives have to change at the financial level. So I think you need both things to happen simultaneously. I don't think the meat lobby is not very powerful, actually, but the plant-based lobby is extremely powerful.
Yes,
Literally the most powerful people in the world. This is no exaggeration. We're talking people like Bill Gates. We're talking very, very powerful people. So there is this, it's a quasi-just view that's also being supported because it's very financially lucrative. So in order to fight something that's much bigger, much more powerful than you, that's not interested in science, it's not looking at evolution, it's not looking at controlled trials, it's headlines and it's associational data, it's not experimental science. So when you're up against this kind of adversary, I don't think you can win everyone by being kind and talking about studies and all of this. I think you have to get people excited about getting healthier. You have to get them excited about good food, good tasting food. You have to have influencers who make the food look amazing, who make the seed oils look disgusting. You have to have people making bread, not the exciting thing about the meal, but they have to make the steak or the fish the exciting part about the meal. So it has to happen on a cultural level that we can all participate. Everyone has a responsibility there as a citizen to participate in the good science, in the tasty things in life, and taking pleasure in things we're evolved to handle, this sort of human rights that we want to reclaim. And on the other hand, we have to be really clever when it comes to the financial aspects. I think we have to encourage people who are trying to monetize good advice, who are trying to create products. I don't care if it's I don't care if it's exercise equipment, I don't care if it's drugs, I don't care if it's a food supplement. You can do it in a way that's going to give people an option that's going to make it healthy. There are companies out there like Perfect Keto who do keto products, and it's much, much better than if we didn't have Perfect Keto, because then people would not have an alternative. So we have to encourage the companies that are doing it. We have to encourage the influencers that are talking about it. We have to we have to give the scientists that are working on these questions space in the media, and we have to give them more funds. We have to make sure that children receive the message. So if you can vote on something having to do with a school view on the sort of food they should have, you should participate in that. So it's everywhere. Food is part of most cultures, pretty much every culture. It's something important that people think about. So there's a lot of opportunities to make a difference. But you have to realize that when you are going against the guidelines and you are not saying that a plant-based diet is a healthy option for most people, that an animal-based diet is healthier for most people, you have to understand you're not just fighting against a different idea. You're fighting against a propaganda lobby. Yes. So once you know this, it helps you approach it more realistically.
Yes, I think it's a big problem, and what worries me is that people have no idea of the industry. This big industry has a huge markup because their products have a shelf lifetime of 1-2 years because of the seed oils and because it's refined carbohydrates, and this markup, it's very lucrative business. And people have no idea. People see the husbandry and thinks that husbandry is the lucrative. There's a game. There is a kind of conspiracy of the people that raises animals, that sells animals, the meat industry. No, the meat industry is nothing close to this food industry that is killing us through seed oils and refined carbohydrates and all this flour that we are full of lectins and gluten. And people have no idea how big it's and how it's it works together with the big pharma and this big industry. And we influencers and keto coaches and doctors all over the world that works with low carb are working together in the job to go to its bottom to top job, because I think we have to form opinion and we have to inform. We have to be together and to inform people and raise this conscience through all the planet Earth. It's a tough job.
Yeah, and I should add two things actually. First is that the best thing you can do is lead by example. So if you make the big change in your life, people can't help but notice it. And maybe they'll say nice things, maybe they'll say bad things. It doesn't matter, because in the end, you will always at least do the right thing for yourself, and you give other people the opportunity to see that it can be done. So I think that's on the personal level crucial. And then it's the other thing that we don't often talk about is the climate change question with regards to meat. So we have the argument, right, that it's saving the planet to eat plants. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I think we have to learn actually from the vegan and plant-based lobbies and understand that the story that they sold is beautiful, because it's you're ethical, you're going to be healthier, and you're saving the planet. It's a perfect message, right? It's simple, it's colorful. Who wants to hurt animals? It's convenient. It's perfect. Right? But the truth of the matter is, I think that the best thing you can do for the planet and for your health is buy a lot of beef and eat a lot of beef. If you can do that, you're probably moving the needle towards sequestering carbon in the fields that the animals are using. You're probably avoiding a lot of terrible foods and eating a nutrient-dense food, right? You're giving more money to cattle farmers than you are to grain farmers, for example, who tend to only feed cattle through grains, for example. So you're doing a lot of good things in a very simple move. So if you want to avoid killing millions of mice and rabbits and birds and
small animals on crops,
exactly. All the deers, even the foxes, all those animals. Don't buy soy, don't buy corn, don't buy grain. Try to avoid things, avoid buying beef that's been mostly fed by grain. Try to find beef that's been raised mostly on grass if you can. You can make much better choices if you're trying to trying to consider the three things. The ethics, the planet, and your health. So eat a lot of ruminants.
I think big pharma leaves a footprint much heavier than animal here on Earth. And one thing we have to consider is that ruminants eats a lot of food that will go to waste, that we don't eat. The residues of everything we don't eat, they eat and transform in some very dense, nutritious food. And this is ecological. This is good for the planet. And if population today eat an animal-based diet, it wouldn't have this big pharma, and big pharma has a bigger footprint than any other industry on Earth. So that's it. That's it, Rafi. Thank you very much for your interview. Thank you for your job. Please try to spread this article on the whole, all the press in Europe, in all the countries. If you need any help here over in Portugal, please let me know, or here in Braga, or even with some newspaper, with some help, let me know. we are here to, we have a very group very united in Brazil, here to in Portugal, with people that work with low carb, and everything you need, please tell us. Thank you.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you for offering, and thank you for speaking to me. It was a lot of fun, and I will just add a last thing, actually, that because you said, how can we help? And one of the ways where you probably can help in the very near future is so I'm helping a clinic, a medical clinic that's brand new in Lisbon, that's going to be ready in about a couple of months. And this clinic is going to be with doctors that totally understand what we're talking about. And they will try to help people get off drugs rather than on more drugs. And they will tell people things like, you should build muscle. You should avoid seed oils. Yeah, you should, all of the stuff that we're talking about.
I think
I'm
you're
really
talking
excited
about Dr. Rui Ribas now. Is him, Dr. Rui Ribas? Are you talking about?
No, I'm not talking about him. No, this is a separate project. We'll be in Lisbon, close to what's it called, Avenida de la Liberdade, I think in Lisbon.
Yes.
So we'll be right by there, and we'll be brand new and very interested in people who are doing, for example, a ketogenic diet, and we would love to be able to follow them.
Me, I'd love to go.
Yeah, so we would love, if you have a health problem or you just want to participate in data collection, we would love to help anyone, who's interested, come to the clinic, and we will, do some cool stuff.
Please let me know. I would love to go. I practiced ketovore for 2 years and a little bit, and I would love to participate in any form that is it's possible. Awesome. Please let me know. Let me know. Say something.
Yeah.
And thank you for your participation. And we'll keep in touch on Twitter, on my page on Facebook, on Instagram, here on WhatsApp. Let's talk to each other. Keep in touch. Thank you so much, Rafi. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Obrigada, gente, pela audiência. Bye bye.